Hello, everybody, and welcome to OpenExO Live. It's really good to be with you. And today we have Stanton Wong, who is coming in from Shanghai. So a little bit late for Stanton, but and you can see there some of the folks coming up in the next couple of weeks. And you can see that we're ending off this season of OpenExO Live, and we will be starting a new one. And so if you're interested in being on the show, do let us know, do go to the marketplace and apply. And before we get Stanton up on screen, I do have a few words that came from some community members. And the first one comes from Patrick, and he just said, Stanton is a good friend of mine from back when I lived in Shanghai. He is bright, hardworking, and the go-to guy for anything related to sustainable buildings and wellness. We then have from Lisa, I met Stanton during one of our networking challenges. We had a great first conversation about everything from education to writing to sustainability. I invited him to write for EXO Insight. Stanton is a versatile and fantastic writer who communicates his passions and stories of impact. I highly recommend that other members of the community reach out to him. He's great to talk to and someone you can always learn from. We then have from Chanda, Stanton has recently volunteered for the newly established OpenExO research community, and it's great to have him on board. Through the initial conversations thus far, he's exemplified his passion for innovation and evangelizing the EXO framework. His initial suggestions and inputs have been highly valuable towards defining the roadmap for the research agenda by leveraging the voice of the broader OpenExO community through polls and surveys. I look forward to continuing to collaborate with him and creating great outputs and outcomes for all of us. And then lastly, from Nikki, Stanton is a gem. We have worked together on projects where he has given superior feedback and advisory services to projects that matter. His devotion to learning, process, and user experience help us experiment with the best outcomes. On top of that, he's also a gifted interviewer and podcast host. If you are seeking a well-rounded talent in sustainable education and technology, Stanton is your go-to collaborator. And so with that, I want to welcome up Stanton. Stanton, welcome. How are you doing this evening?
Hi, Kevin. Thank you very much. I'm super flattered. I didn't know that was going to happen. And it's really good to hear from all the collaborators I've had in OpenExO so far.
No, it's one thing that I love doing. It's not always easy to either find the people or to narrow down the people to share about what the community is doing, with one another, and often, without us in the core actually even knowing, which is wonderful, right? That's actually what makes a great community, and so it's an absolute pleasure, and it was great to hear from folks. And so with that, I always start off by just asking for the guest that I'm chatting to give a bit of a background about yourself. Tell those who are watching a little bit about yourself, what it is that you do, and also how you came to join the OpenExO community.
Yeah, so I'm currently in sustainable buildings. I run a company that focuses on standards and certifications that targets performance data for buildings, specifically focusing on sustainability and health. So the standard's called Reset, and the main difference about what we do from more traditional green building standards is that we're very focused on data. So we don't have a target or focus on solutions. It's more on how can you collect the best data and then use that data to better understand how your building is performing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the main focus that we have right now. And then aside from that, on the side, I also am the education director for a crypto project called Horizon Protocol. It's a DeFi project focused around synthetic assets. And then my other side project, which is more personal, is around education. So I feel very strongly about how the education system is designed right now, and that it could be vastly improved. So I organized my thoughts into sort of a book format, and I'm hoping to publish it sometime later this year.
Oh wow, that's really wonderful. And so what was it that brought you to the OpenExO community initially?
Yeah, so I kind of joined before it was called OpenExO. I think there was at least a token called CivX. I don't actually remember what the entire project was called anymore. But the thing that brought me to it was a long time ago. I took a Strength Finders test, which is there's a book with a test that explains what you're kind of oriented towards. And my first kind of description of myself, my first strength was that I was a futurist. And so I've always had a tendency to look into the future. And I think back in the day when we're just looking at CivX and the genesis of OpenExO, it was very much about looking into the future with exponential ideas, that kind of stuff. And I was interested in building a larger community of people that I could connect with outside of my current ecosystem and circles. And so that's why I kind of got involved initially.
No, that's great. And one thing about exponential organizations and the whole EXO model is very much that we start with purpose, and many of our community members have their own sort of personal massive transformative purpose. And in fact, part of the foundation certification is creating that, is actually coming up with that. And so what is your MTP? I would guess it's something around education, or maybe not, but it'd be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, I think OpenExO was the push that helped me kind of figure out what it was. And the specific statement is nudge the world towards sustainability via technology and education.
Okay. That's super important, right? And at the moment, I think I go through waves. Some days it feels like no one cares, and then other days you feel really upbeat when you see things, see projects, see some great possibilities for a more sustainable future. And we definitely are going to get into speaking about what you do at Reset. But before that, I just wanted to understand, in terms of the EXO model, how are you, we sort of believe that the EXO model can be implemented anywhere. It's not about being a Silicon Valley company, although some people really do think that way. Would you agree with that statement that that ultimately leveraging the EXO attributes can be done anywhere, and I guess especially in China, right? For those in the community that are perhaps not too familiar with what's going on there.
Yeah, I think the EXO model is very accessible to everybody. It just comes down to how you think. Exponential thinking, I think, is just understanding that things don't move linearly. Any entrepreneur who's tried to build a business and try to bring it to scale would have thought about this at some point. The thing is that most people have not been entrepreneurs. Most people have kind of worked within a system of some sort where you do see progression as linear. If you're trying to climb up the ranks of a larger company, you're looking at it linearly in many ways. But once you're trying to start building something from scratch, you look for opportunities where you can basically save costs and scale much faster. In terms of China, I think the biggest thing is that China's population and marketplace is really, really large. So most businesses, if you focus just on China, you have a $1 billion business potentially. While in certain other markets, the market buying power isn't nearly as strong. And so you would have to start local, and then if you want to expand, you might have to expand into other languages. You might have to expand into other territories. You have to deal with new legal frameworks, all that stuff. And then that's very costly in terms of time and everything. So I think a lot of people in China, they really, even if they don't think they do, they really exemplify the EXO model, mainly because of the ability to scale in China.
No, absolutely. And as Salim often says, the EXO model isn't something that they came up with, out of their heads or anything that was really new. It was, looking at what organizations are doing out in the world, and putting a framework around that, giving the different elements, the different attributes names, and allowing people to therefore leverage that to understand it better. And so many of the there are many examples of organizations that we often share about that are based in China, right, that are definitely leveraging the attributes, whether they know it or not, right, in that sort of, in those words and that framework. So how would you say you're sort of leveraging exponential thinking in your daily life, in your daily work?
I think in daily work, I don't think we specifically thought about it this way initially. It was very much about how I was talking about it before. When you're starting a company or you're starting new ideas, you're very limited in resources. And so you really think about how can you take those resources as far as possible. So for us, what we've discovered is we want to figure out how to automate as much of the process as possible. Automation essentially is, because we deal with a lot of data. So we do auditing. So all our audits, we try to figure out how to automate that so the system does it itself. We don't have to manually do everything. And that allows us to scale faster when that time comes. The other thing is we limit our team to be relatively small, partially because of a funding issue initially, but it allows us to really think about who are the core people important for the team, and then figuring out how do they play multiple roles so that we can essentially be very small, tight-knit, and very effective at pivoting if necessary, especially since we're pushing the market a little bit in terms of what we're trying to do. Sustainability and health in buildings are not exactly money makers, if I could kind of phrase it that way. And so we are slowly nudging the industry in that direction by kind of exposing the values and benefits of doing things that way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for buildings to be, I mean, it really all comes down to the data, right? And the if you can show those buildings that have better air quality, and then look at health data of people working within that building, hey, there actually is some sort of correlation here. But those sort of studies, etc., I mean, are not necessarily easy, take a lot of time, and there's so many aspects of it that I guess you have to cross in order to come up with something that people can see what the tangible benefit really is.
Yeah, just to kind of build off of that a little bit, from our perspective, one of the main reasons that we do what we do is because a lot of the things is not tangible. You can't see it. So for example, our biggest kind of initial starting point was around air quality. You don't see air quality unless you're very used to it. I've gotten good at looking at air quality. So when I wake up in the morning, I can look outside my window and kind of guess what the air quality is, just because I'm so used to it and so aware of it. But for most people, you only really notice it if you have some kind of number in front of you. So continuous monitoring, sensors that can help you visualize this air quality is really important. And just generally from a data perspective, I think why it's so important, it's the initial benchmark for everything that you're going to try to do afterwards. So imagine if you're doing financial trading with data that's updated once a month. It's crazy to think about it now because it's updated almost every second. And once you have that higher quality data and more frequency of data, that's when you start to really be able to optimize and look for opportunities with solutions, etc. So our push right now, the reason why we focus so much on the data and the collection of data is because we don't think there's enough data that is quality data for buildings yet. And so solutions, there's a lot, but every building has a different kind of structure, and so probably necessary for different types of solutions. But data, we can at least set a standard for it, so we can gradually compare buildings against each other from an apples to apples perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, I mean, whenever anyone's speaking about data, I mean, with an EXO frame, you're always ultimately thinking, algorithms, because that's, I mean, data is important, but actually being able to leverage that data, as you've been saying, is actually what's more important. And so, in terms of sustainable building practices, how do you think we can leverage more EXO attributes to actually positively affect that, right? I mean, we need to to really drive that. When on my run today, I was running down the road seeing 3 buildings being knocked down, houses being knocked down just to build new houses, and my mind sort of thinks, did we really need to do that? Just to have something that looked nicer, but all of that sort of carbon it took to build that house, maybe 25 years ago, has all just disappeared. And now we're gonna have a whole bunch more. So, but yeah, I don't know what you think about the other attributes in terms of sustainable building practices.
So I really want to touch upon, I don't know if I can structure this live in terms of EXO attributes, but I want to really quickly mention just the whole like taking down of buildings and reconstructing new ones. One part that's left out a lot is embodied carbon. So we talk about buildings as material banks. So if you have a really good building or a really well-designed building from a sustainability perspective, you should be able to put all these materials into the building. And when you need to demolish, you take all of it back out to be used again. So a very circular kind of design, very sustainable in the long run. But most buildings aren't designed like that. So what we think needs to be done, and this is one of the standards that we have for embodied, we have embodied carbon and embodied circularity. The idea is that instead of looking at just the price and the kind of other metrics that we use right now for construction, for let's say steel, wood, and all the interior finishes, instead of just looking at what it looks like, the price, and how strong it is, we also want to start looking at what the carbon data is for that, and also what the circularity data is. And both of this will make it so that when you're looking at like rebuilding or taking down buildings, you have that calculation in place. One of the projects we're doing right now in Shanghai, or that we're helping do, is we've calculated how much carbon they save by not knocking down half the buildings that they were going to knock down, and instead of renovating them, so that they, like from a stylistic view or a design view, like you see part of the old buildings and you see the new buildings mixed together, and visually it's very appealing. The other very appealing thing is, from the calculations, they save approximately 50% of the carbon they would have used if they had to knock everything down. Because not only are you building new, you're also knocking down. And the waste that's generated when you're knocking stuff down, most of that is not like what we would call material bank, like recyclable, right? So most of it's going to go to a landfill somewhere. And that's a lot of carbon. So it's just, how can we get these additional metrics in front of people?
Exactly. I think that, as you've said, trying to uncover as much data as possible is so important, right? Because, and especially as we move to a future where we can use things, like carbon credits as a tool, but if we don't have really good data, you can't actually use it, right? Because then it's so easy to essentially, for polluters to buy offsets that are not real, right? And I think, there's a number of people who oppose the whole carbon credit system because of that, right? That there are offsets that just aren't real, and so trying to ensure that we have the data for that, I think, is so important.
Yeah, it really is very, very easy to greenwash right now. And so from our perspective, it's every statement that you make about whatever like kind of carbon you save, or what kind of circular metrics you hit, it has to be backed by data. Either some kind of embodied data for all the materials you use, or if it's an operating, like if you say that you're net zero, if you say that you're carbon neutral, there should be data that backs it up, where you can see the reporting or something that shows that this is all legitimate.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, 100%. And so, I guess on that topic, are there any exciting technologies or maybe companies that you've seen in the space that you're like, man, this is something that I think really is going to positively affect our future?
In construction, I think I'm going to go back a little bit, because I think the reason why I like the word nudge so much is because I think things happen much like there's a very small gradual step-by-step that happens, but it snowballs over time. And so I think all the best technologies right now are really boring for what we want to achieve. For example, right now, if we're talking about scale, what we personally want to see for scale is the mass collection of data. Because once you have the data, you can automate systems. We talk about smart buildings all the time, IoT systems. And whenever a company comes to us to say, like, how do we become greener or more sustainable, we tell them that start collecting the data. And then once you have the data, you can figure out exactly where to optimize. And the optimization of energy is stupidly simple. And it's figuring out when to turn on and when to turn off systems. So HVAC systems currently take up maybe 40 to 60% of a building's energy usage. If you can figure out when to turn on fresh air systems and when to turn them off, and when there's people in the space that needs cooling or heating, you can already save 50% of the energy for that building just by focusing on that. And that's just a couple sensors that's needed. Aside from that, it's just looking at when is there a certain amount of population in the building. For ventilation systems, how do you design it so that they can turn on and off for different areas of the building? So a lot of it's just how do you design all the data collection so that you can use it for automation? And if you can do that, you're going to save a ton of energy during operations. And then for materials and how you build, it really is, again, down to, can we incentivize the entire community or industry of material makers to actually get this data? Because that's the hardest thing for us. Most materials don't have this data available because it's slightly expensive. So we need to optimize the industry to be able to easily and inexpensively collect this data.
Yeah, and feel that there's an incentive to share data where it makes sense for the broader sort of everybody, right? Now you said, hey, you've mentioned the word nudge many times, right? And so the one thing that makes me think is, how should we be using nudge theory or nudges to actually get people to think more exponentially, to understand the EXO attributes more, potentially to think more sustainably? And because I think those two elements really are quite linked, right? In order for us to see the change we need, we can't think linearly like we did for the many years that have created many of the problems we have now. We have to have that different change, that different thinking. And so, what would those nudges look like? What should we potentially be doing?
This is a great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is I've been participating in kind of a side group of OpenExO that's doing a community game. And the community game focuses a lot on gamification. I think gamification is a very good example of nudging, where you're essentially trying to figure out small ways to push someone to kind of get out of their comfort zone and do something slightly extra. So most people are kind of set in their ways. They have their normal kind of process, they have their habits, and they're just going to go about their lives in that way. Very few people are really actively seeking discomfort and trying something new all the time. So I think that a lot of what we can do for sharing more knowledge around EXO is, number one, I think entrepreneurs, like if you can push someone into trying to essentially work off of limited resources to make something happen, they will automatically have to think exponentially with the world as it is today. And I think the other thing is just in general for nudging, it really is just having snippets of things that people can digest really easily and let them see what is possible with exponential thinking. And I think one of the things that was done previously, there was like the 10,000 something exponential where 32 times you can get up to whatever number. Like that kind of concept is powerful because you stop thinking directly linearly, but you go into an exponential kind of thinking in how, like if you can just double over and over again, what happens?
Yes.
I think nudging is really going to be education focused and just example focused, where we can slowly let people think about this kind of concept.
No, absolutely. And so I can't believe it. We've pretty much reached the end of our conversation. It feels like we've just started. We've just started getting warmed up. It's been fantastic chatting to you. And I always end off by asking the guest, to share one thing with people. Like if there was only one thing that you could share with folks, what would that one thing be that you want people to know and understand?
I think I lean more back to education because I think this is the most applicable to most people. And this is going to tie in a little bit to Chat GPT and all the AI stuff that's coming up. The kind of central concept of what I want to push for education is that there's three really important concepts that every single person should learn about. The first one is how to connect with yourself. So I think there is no like in traditional education, we don't talk about feelings as much. We don't talk about self-confidence. We don't talk about self-respect. That's just not part of the core curriculum. I think this is really critical for everything that we do in life. So that's one thing that I think is really important. The second thing is how to connect with others. Communication, language, all that stuff is really what makes humans human. When, let's say, AI takes over, when there's a lot of robots doing all the labor, etc., the one thing that humans will still be very relevant for is communication between two different entities, companies, etc. So that's always going to be valuable. And the last thing is connecting with the community and society. So understanding the rules of the game, governments, financial systems, money, etc., I think is super valuable for education. And so that's what I'll leave with in terms of what I think is really important for the world.
Awesome, Stanton. That makes me want to ask more questions, but not this time around. We're going to have to get you back on. And actually, I've been thinking about how we can get groups of people onto OpenExO Live as well, and have different formats as well, which should be quite exciting. So it's been wonderful chatting to you. Thank you for joining so late in the evening there in Shanghai. And yeah, I hope you have a fantastic evening further.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for having me.
Bye-bye. So great chatting to Stanton. I think as Stefano said here, awesome live. Congrats, Stanton. And so thank you very much for joining. We're going to end off just with a video about Exponential Organizations 2.0. If you want to give it a read before it's released to the public, you can do so. at openexo.com/book. And we'll see you all next week.